My guest at this time can be seen every week on his YouTube channel and really just kind of across all of media in general, talking to famous pro wrestlers, famous actors, comedians. It's Chris Van Vliet. Chris, welcome back to the Wrestling Nick Daily.
It's so good to be back, Nick. It's been a long time since I've been on.
Yeah, the Daily I've done. We talked on Waldman's podcast a little while ago. That was nice.
Yeah.
Always good to have Sean in the mix as well. But no, it's been a while since we've had a chance to chat one-on-one, Chris.
Yeah, I think like 2 years since I was on. So, I mean, like obviously a ton has changed since then.
Yeah, so the big news, obviously, this past week was you hit 300,000 subscribers over on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, that's the big news. Yeah. No,
well,
thank you.
That's a big milestone, man.
Yeah.
300,000 subscribers. I know that you are super engaged with your platform and the iTunes reviews and everything. That's got to feel really good to know all that hard work paid off with that big number there.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Nick. Like I appreciate you like giving those kudos. I super appreciate it. It's been such a long time coming, and I think that a lot of people have only started watching my interviews over the last few years. But I started my YouTube channel 10 years ago. So for it to now finally have some sort of traction has been really exciting. So it's just cool, man, because as you know, sometimes, especially during the last 18 months or so, you kind of feel like you're doing this in a vacuum. It's literally just you and a microphone and a webcam. And that's it. I don't know about you, but I'm sitting in my empty apartment right now. And it's just so crazy that other people are also like able to consume this content.
Because for you, I know you really enjoy doing the live in-person interviews, the sit-downs with people. That's really what you were known for pre-pandemic. It's been an adjustment, I know, for you having to move over to that Zoom and try to keep that connection and that cadence going with the interviews you're doing these days.
Well, I'll admit it. I didn't even have a Zoom account before the pandemic started. And I remember someone was like, can we connect on Zoom? And I'm like, can't we just like Skype or I don't know, FaceTime or something? And boy, Zoom figured it out very quickly. And so did the rest of us, that this is the way that we can all stay in touch. But yeah, the thing I loved about doing in-person interviews, and the thing I do love about in-person interviews, is there's just that maybe it's that 1% difference, being able to look someone in the eye, shake their hand, feel their energy, give them a hug. And that was really how I built most of my career. All the interviews I was doing were in person. We're talking about all the different TV stations that I worked for. Right. When we had the opportunity to do like a satellite interview, before Zoom was really a thing, you kind of went, yeah, I mean, we'll do the satellite interview, but can we do one in person? Because like it's just so much better, so much different in person. So I've made the pivot. Everybody else over the last 18 months have made different pivots in their life, but I'm just glad that we're in this pandemic now in 2020/2021 versus imagine this was in the 90s. What would we be doing? Like, long distance phone calls were still a thing back then.
Yeah. If this was the 90s, I think we'd all, I don't know what we'd be. We'd all be dead or something like that.
I don't know.
The lack of communication alone would have been very difficult.
Or maybe that's it. Maybe we wouldn't realize, what was really going on or how many people this was affecting because word didn't spread as quickly back then.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Totally.
Yeah.
And so 10 years on the YouTube channel here, doing all these interviews and stuff. I'll ask you the broad question, like, of all the interviews you've done, is there one for you that means something where it's most memorable, it's special? Is there one out there from those 10 years that stands out the most to you, Chris?
I think I got to go back to like, it's The Rock for me. And I was a huge Rock fan growing up, and I became I was always a wrestling fan, but became a massive wrestling fan during the Attitude Era. So it's The Rock. And I dressed up as The Rock for Halloween one year. I would ask people in my high school questions just so I could simply shout, "It doesn't matter what you think," at them. Like I was a huge Rock fan. And he was at the top of my bucket list for years and years and years. And I was doing all kinds of different celebrity interviews. So it wasn't until I was 7 years into my career that I finally did get an interview with The Rock. And they always say, you shouldn't interview your heroes. You shouldn't meet your heroes. But man, if your hero is The Rock, you should do whatever you can to meet him. Like he's great. He's everything you want him to be and more.
Okay, so you've interviewed a lot of people now, Chris. Is there any, you talk about that was top of your bucket list.
Yeah.
Is there anybody left, right? Is there like a name where you're like, man, if I could just get this person, that would really be a coup for me.
Oh, like, so after The Rock, it was now I got to do an interview with Tom Cruise. And I was so incredibly fortunate to do an interview with Tom Cruise, red carpet for the last Mission Impossible movie in Paris, in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. I was just like, I literally had a moment there where I just like took it all in and I went, I can't believe I'm here right now. And Tom Cruise is so incredibly present when he speaks to you. It's like you're the only person in the world that exists in that moment. So that was another one. Unbelievable. Now I'm such a huge fan of film, and I would love an hour with Christopher Nolan. Like to be able to sit down and just pick Christopher Nolan's brain about, number one, how he makes these films, but number two, his obsession with time. And you think about all his films, Memento, Inception, Interstellar, there's this theme of time. And I'm fascinated by that. Clearly not the level that Christopher Nolan is fascinated by, but I would love to just pick his brain about all of that stuff.
Yeah. So who do you think right now is going to be the next big wrestler to break out and go Hollywood? Is it Roman? You think it's Becky Lynch? Is it Sasha Banks? Who do you feel is most on the cusp right now?
I was having a discussion about this with someone recently. And what's interesting when we think about people who have really broken out into Hollywood, there's the three names that always come up, right? It's Rock, it's Batista, and it's John Cena.
Sure.
And what's interesting about all three of those people is they completely left wrestling behind to kind of forge this new path for themselves. So I don't think that if you really want to make it in Hollywood, I don't think you can be an active wrestler. I think you have to say, all right, what I've done in the ring is my career. That's that. I'm now starting this new career in Hollywood. So I think if it's Becky or I think if it's Roman, they're going to start to put in the work now with those guest spots. And we've seen that, you know, Roman's been in a few things. I think though, that if they really want to take it seriously, they have to dive all the way in. And I love the phrase that says, if you chase two rabbits, you'll catch none. And I think that that's really true. I don't think that you can be uber successful like The Rock has been, or like John Cena is now getting, if you're dipping your toe in both worlds.
Yeah, for sure. It's really hard to get John and Rock back, right? Like I think everybody was like, this is that moment to do Roman Rock. And it sounds like we may not even get it for another, year and a half until WrestleMania in LA because of how busy The Rock is at the moment.
I also just feel like The Rock he's not done with wrestling. Like I like that he will always, talk about wrestling and he always has a huge place in his heart for it. But if he does have one last match, is that it? Or, does he just keep going?
Yeah, I don't know why he couldn't do a match every other. Unless his body just doesn't want to do it anymore. It's like, I can't even fathom how many people's livelihoods depend on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson being healthy. It's like a small town.
Oh my gosh.
Amount of people that depend on him,
The thing we always forget is we just see The Rock starring in these movies. We don't understand how much is going on behind the scenes with $7 production and him being a producer of these movies. So when you talk about everybody who's relying on him, it's not just the people on the movie set with him. It's everybody behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, for sure. So with Roman here, he's got Brock Lesnar obviously at Crown Jewel this Thursday. Do you keep the title on him, or is it more compelling for you to see the Paul Heyman turn, Brock Lesnar take this title, watch the Tribal Chief try to get his belt back? Which direction is more appealing to you right now with Roman?
Look, I think that's inevitable. I just don't think it happens yet. I think that we keep building up. Maybe that's a Royal Rumble thing that leads then into WrestleMania. I also don't know if as fans, we really are used to like looking at Crown Jewel as one of the quote unquote big events or one of the quote unquote pay-per-view events. I think we kind of look at it as like, a pumped up version of Raw or pumped up version of SmackDown. And I don't know if we go into that show expecting titles to change hands.
I don't know, man. Crazy things happen out in the
They do.
Body. Who would have thought that The Fiend was going to lose to Goldberg in a matter of moments out in Saudi Arabia? But hey, that happened, right?
You're right. Anything can happen in the WWE. I just think that we're so close to like the end of the year, and then the road to WrestleMania will begin in January. And I think that that's where we're going to see some of the bigger storylines shake out.
Are you enjoying King of the Ring, the Queen's Crown tournament, or is this grabbing you right now?
Yeah, I think that what they're doing here has been really interesting. I'm very curious because what's interesting is when we were growing up, the King of the Ring was like, kind of like a title, right? It was like almost like, you got put over and you got a title. Now it turns into this like whole gimmick, which is so interesting. So it's not just about like who is going to be put over. It's who can live this gimmick, who can have this king, queen, British gimmick, which is what they seem to always kind of do with this. Like who can do that?
I see. For me, I know that Finn Balor, because he's like the prince, right? And now he's the king. Like that makes a lot of sense. But for my money, the guy who could use it, and we're recording this before Raw, so we'll see tomorrow how this played out. But I think Jinder Mahal could really use something like this, and I think Maharaja even means king. So he seems like the kind of guy that could maybe get the most out of being a king right now. I don't know.
And I agree. And I also feel like Jinder has like a huge amount of potential that's not being tapped into right now. He is an incredible heel. People just dislike him. Just like, it doesn't matter what he does. They just dislike him. And I think that that's the perfect person to give something like this to and kind of give him that little bit of a boost.
Yeah, kind of like QT Marshall. Like I'm always so impressed with QT over in AEW because like it's hard to be a heel in AEW because the fans want to like literally everybody, right? They like JF because he's so good at being a heel. It's so hard to go out there and get real heat. And I think he's maybe one of the only guys in AEW that really does that,
Now, is he getting real heat or is he getting X-Pac heat, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good. I don't know. I think he's getting good heat. What do you think?
And maybe it's a combination of both, but I was watching the other day and Dan Lambert comes out to cut a promo and people just like instinctively hate him. And like, I feel like that is X-Pac heat.
Okay. I don't know.
And this is no disrespect to X-Pac, who we both love and have a tremendous amount of respect for, but we understand what the terminology means here.
Sure. I don't know, though, man. Dan Lambert is one of my favorite things in pro wrestling. It is not go away heat for me. It is. Please continue talking. I really, really enjoyed Dan Lambert's like.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, maybe he's won you over as being a great heel.
What is it about Lambert that's not grabbing it for you? Do you just think he's out of place, like curmudgeon-y? Like what is it not?
I think it's more that it did feel like it came out of nowhere. Like it felt like it came out of nowhere, and he was getting all of this mic time when I felt like there were all these other people on the roster that could have really benefited from this mic time. And you're making him the manager for Ethan Page, tremendous on the mic himself. Scorpio Sky, tremendous on the mic himself. It's not like they really needed a mouthpiece. And I just thought it was strange. Maybe it's because Ethan and Scorpio are so good on the mic, they needed to bring someone in to like give them some like that heel rub. I don't know. But that first promo where they were up in the like press box, I was just like, no one seems to be caring what they're talking about.
Okay, fine, fair. Hey, to each his own. I like it. It reminds me of like when Jim Cornette would do the like Cornette's Minute or whatever back in the throes of the right, where he would just take like as a child, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, what is this man talking about? As an adult, I look back on it and I'm like, oh, he was just trying to say like inside things that would really cater to this. I think Dan Lambert does a really good job of that, right? Like he sounds like what Vince McMahon says about AEW's product, right? Like he is the Vince McMahon of the AEW universe.
And don't get me wrong, this is no disrespect to Dan. I've never met him, but he seems like a great human being. All I'm saying is that there's like certain cadences, I think, in a wrestling promo. And I just feel like there's certain times when he's getting like booed like crazy, especially early on in those promos.
Yeah.
Where I feel like there would be a moment where maybe he pauses. And I just feel like he's like, trying to get to the end of his promo. Like, oh, this is my next line. I got to say this and then this and then this.
That's true. It is very much, he has a lot of the promos in AEW are unscripted, right? And that's this is a guy you could tell took hours writing, ridiculously planting and delivering. And you know what, Chris? I think, that's a good note. Maybe could live better in the moment, right?
I am not an expert on this. I have cut very few promos in a independent wrestling ring. I am not the person to speak on this. I'm just saying I think that this has nothing to do with Dan Lambert, but there's a lot of times when someone from the Hollywood world will come into wrestling and it just doesn't translate. Like there's something about like getting really soft and calm and then getting loud when you have to and looking around. Every wrestling promo has one of those.
Sure.
And there's a lot of times when like A-listers come over, like when they were doing the Raw general managers, like the special guests all the time, just like, oh yeah, you've never watched wrestling before.
So while we're talking about getting heat here, what do you think about Cody in this moment, right? Like, it's an interesting time for Cody. He seems to like they're doubling down on him as a baby face, but the fans really don't seem to want to like Cody right now. Like, what do you think of the current state of Cody Rhodes in AEW?
Why don't they like Cody? What do you think? What's your opinion on it?
I definitely think he ruffled some feathers with some of his promos that had some political overtones. I think there was certainly something there. I think Brandi has a kind of she's a heat magnet, man. I don't really, and like we talk about like the QT thing. Is she a great heel, or is it just like who she is? I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but like I think people don't like Brandi. The Malachi Black. I almost feel like we got a double turn in the Malachi Black match. We're like, the fans really like, I mean, how do you not like Malachi Black? He's this badass, Nordic, satanic ass kicker, and then you got this pretty boy Cody. I think in that match, you really saw the fans decide who they like. And I think they chose Black over Cody there.
Do you think that this is, and I'm just guessing here, I'm just spitballing. Do you think that this is fans going, we know you make a lot of the decisions behind the scenes, and we don't like that you keep booking yourself in these situations. So that's why we're going to boo you.
And the thing is, like, if you look at Cody's booking, there have been a lot of people that came in, there were hot commodities, and then Cody beat them, and then they were elevated. Some of them got elevated, like Eddie Kingston. Obviously, he lost to Cody, but then came back, and Eddie Kingston's having the best run of his entire life right now.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of people that come in that are used to kind of give Cody a good program, and then Cody will walk away and on to the next thing as the winner. I think if they do Malachi Black Cody 3, which is possible at Full Gear, if Cody beats Malachi Black, the decision I think is made to make him a heel. I don't think the fans want to see that, and I think because of what you just said is viewing him as an executive who's in charge, him putting himself over a fan favorite like Black would, absolutely solidify him as a heel.
It almost seems like what was happening with Triple H a handful of years ago, where people went,
yeah.
And look, I like a lot of the booking that Cody's done. I think that it's also kind of I think it's a nice like pat on the back, like, hey, you're coming into this company, and a lot of times like I'm going to put you over, so then it's going to make you look good. I'll try to look good in the end. Like, I think that that's interesting. I thought it was strange when Cody faked the retirement thing. I was just like, that whole segment was very strange. Like, I get where they were heading with it, but like he's in the ring and then a crutch comes into the ring for some random reason. The crutch is the size of like a small child's crutch. And then he's very slowly taking off his boots. And I'm like, are they doing what I think they're doing? No, this can't actually. Cody's younger than me. He can't be retiring. What's going on here?
Hey, look, dude, that moonsault he took off the top of the cage, I'd be done after that one, man. Like that, he's talked about his knees are shot because of that particular moonsault,
Wow. Yeah. And look, I'm sure he didn't feel it in the moment. I'm sure he didn't feel it for a while. And that adrenaline starts to wear off and you go, oh, okay. I feel the same way about the Young Bucks. Like the Young Bucks' greatest competition is the Young Bucks' last match, because they're always trying to outdo themselves. And how much further, Matt, Nick, can you guys push yourselves?
What did you think of the back and forth they had with Top Dollar AJ Francis over the sneakers last week? I kind of feel like they got owned a little bit by AJ in the end.
I'm very curious, like what's going to happen from there? Or is that it? Is that like, because
they sent Max Caster out, and that he's doing their fighting now for AEW in the hip hop department. It was, I don't like, they're so good at leaning into stuff and owning the moment. This was a very rare moment where I feel like they did not lean in and win this moment. I feel like they are retreating from this moment. I don't know that this is a fight they really want to have.
I'm really curious whether this even gets brought up again, because you're right. AEW is really good at like leaning into okay, this thing's happening. We're going to lean right into that and see where it goes from here. I don't know. I don't know, but I will say this, like, I think that the landscape of AEW, and we mentioned, some of the big names there, like the Bucks or Cody, 3 years into it now, like, I think this might be starting to shift. And if we were to have this conversation 3 years from now, Nick, I think we're talking about a bunch of different names.
Yeah, very, very, very possible. Talk about a bunch of different names. You have a lot of new names over at AEW in the past 3 months. CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Adam Cole, a lot of names all at once. Do you have any worry that AEW's maybe burned out their audience a little bit with just so much stuff happening all at once? Is there a risk, you think, for them in doing that?
I just think they've set the bar extremely high. And it's been amazing, right? Because they've been living up to it all the time. But I think the bar is set like so high.
Yeah.
And it's not unlike when you first start dating someone, right? You're dating that guy, you're dating that girl. And you're taking them to all these, like, fancy restaurants and all of these exciting adventures that you're going on and vacations. How long can you keep that up for? That's great for the first 3, 6, 9 months, maybe even a year. But can you keep that same pace going year after year, month after month? I don't know. And if, obviously CM Punk was a huge story across the world, not just in wrestling. Like, people who hadn't watched wrestling in years were like, oh yeah, I heard CM Punk's back. That's amazing. That's crazy. Even if they're not watching AEW, they're aware that he's back. Where do you go from here? Obviously, you can have these, great storylines, great matches with everyone you just listed: Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Adam Cole. I don't know. Like, Bray Wyatt comes in. I'm guessing perhaps Braun Strowman one day, but I don't know if you can keep riding the momentum of this person is a free agent, we'll bring them in. Then this person's a free agent, and then we'll bring them in. Because AEW has been really, really good at taking the talent that they have built themselves and then cultivating that and making their stars, go up, like Darby Allin or MJF, or, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me in this moment because, like, yeah, those young names you mentioned there, they're being used right now to kind of help elevate these new guys that are coming in. And I'm really surprised, especially with Punk, that we haven't got anything substantial to sink our teeth into. Like, I know that we are watching Punk reestablish himself. You're going to have to get a couple wins to, I mean, what are we talking? The guy's already CM Punk, right? Like, I don't know that he needs to be reestablished. I'm surprised we haven't found a foil for him. Like, what's the story? What's this guy doing? Like,
yeah. I was kind of like fantasy booking his return, and I was thinking how great it would be for Cult of Personality to hit Chicago, Illinois, crowd going crazy. CM Punk. He comes out, he's cutting his promo, and then MJF's music hits. How great would that have been?
Yes, and that gives him a foil out of the gate, somebody you want to see him working with. I really thought that with the Powerhouse Hobbs match, we were going to see the video game play out. First you get Hobbs, then you get to Hook, finally the big boss and Ricky Starks, but of course they shifted the title over to Sammy Guevara. But, like, I really thought we were going to get to see something prolonged there with Punk working through the members of Team Taz. And it was really just kind of, 2 weeks set up, knock down, on to the next thing kind of deal.
I guess my only thing that works against that MJF, thing that I was fantasy booking is if that match does happen, CM Punk and MJF can't really lose there, and CM Punk can't really lose either. So I understand why they went the way they went, but I also don't understand how, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking in an old school, like, Attitude Era 1990s way, but, like, what was the buildup to CM Punk and Darby Allin? Why did that match happen? And the match happened because CM Punk went, hey, Darby Allin, I'd like to have a match with you. And they went, oh, okay, I guess that match is happening. And that's fine. I actually love that ECW style of booking. ECW did that, so well. But I think that we don't need to see CM Punk wrestle every single week in the same way that we don't need to see Brock Lesnar wrestle every single week. And this would be akin to Brock Lesnar being gone for a long time, which he's done, and then coming back and having matches on Raw or SmackDown with, like, I don't know, like, just mid-card guys. And that's not, I'm not saying that about Darby Allin, but, like, some of these matches that CM Punk's having, I'm like, I don't really know if we need to see this match. It's cool to see CM Punk in action. That's great. But he could just be there building, like, a huge storyline here every single week. And then we see him wrestle once every 6 or 8 weeks.
And see, I'm totally about that, Chris. But that's the thing is, I'm really like baffled by the fact we haven't seen anything really come to fruition substantially booking wise. And I know that, with AEW, this is not uncommon. Like, Miro came in and kind of, he did the stuff with Cody, but they kind of floundered, and then he found his groove, and now he's off into the races. I think Andrade kind of similarly kind of fits into that as well. Even Malachi Black, we're now kind of starting to see him find his groove. It takes a little bit, but I mean, you got Punk here, man. And like, emotion sells, right? And the fact that I have not been able to emotionally invest in a feud with Punk, and he keeps teasing he's going to come out the heel, I don't know. Is that the answer? I think a loss would not hurt him. I think that it would maybe surprise people and would, get me more intrigued to see what does a fired up Punk looking to prove himself after a loss look like. At least that's something, right? Like, it's just getting a little predictable with me and with him and Brian, where it's like, I get it. You're gonna come out, you're gonna have a good match, great match, and then you're gonna win,
Yeah, and who's the loss to, right? Because I think when you look at all the matches that he's had since he came back to AEW, none of them I don't think would have made sense for them to be losses.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's like, what is the story you're trying to tell here? What's the story, right?
Yeah, and look, and I think that he eventually becomes the world champion. Maybe it's not in 2021, but likely in 2022.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I still kind of, like, part of me wonders if like one day he could just be gone. Like, part of me wonders if this is just like him feeling it out, seeing how his body feels, seeing how the fans take to it, and he's already started talking about how beat up he feels because wrestling's very, very hard and you fall down all the time. Part of me wonders, like, does he make it a year in AEW? I don't know, man.
I also think that he has the luxury of being able to say, you know what, I don't think I need to wrestle this month, or I don't think I need to wrestle until the next pay-per-view. And they're going to go, oh yeah, don't make sense for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Tony Khan has become the lead chef, right? Like, that story has been so fascinating for me to watch. Like, the power, like, what is the dynamic between Tony and the EVPs right now? Like, that's become its own kind of news cycle right at the moment, So
I will say that Tony Khan has had some really interesting booking, and this is not by any means a WWE versus AEW or a WWE versus TNA or any Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, anything like that. I'm just saying that AEW has had some really exciting television, some really exciting pay-per-views. And I've been saying this all along, rising tides lift all ships. So if more eyeballs are on AEW now, that means more eyeballs are on wrestling in general, because they're bringing a lot of those lapsed fans in who are, maybe hadn't watched wrestling in 5, 10, maybe more, 15, 20 years. So I think it's exciting. If AEW is getting more eyeballs, everybody is getting more eyeballs.
I agree with that to like an extent, because like it's still hard to not, call out the elephant in the room, which is AEW, their viewership from a year ago is up 30%. WWE's down, I think, like a nickel, like 5-10%, like across all of them. You look at ticket sales, AEW going to the UBS Arena, they got 7,600 tickets sold. Same venue a week before that, WWE, 3,400 tickets sold. Do you think WWE needs to change anything? Is it like, does their model work, or do you think there's something they need to be doing to counter this momentum right now?
Do you not think that are we not taking from a pool of wrestling fans? So like, I don't know if all people on TV, all wrestling fans will watch every single show on TV. I don't know if that still exists. I also think that, we can get an entire, hour about how archaic television ratings are, like how incredibly archaic and ridiculous the Nielsen rating system is, like so like old school. Like, you might as well be sending faxes with how old it is. It's so bad. I would like to see maybe one day where we go, all right, this is the number it did on TV. This is how many YouTube views that the clips from that show got. This is how many views the tweets from that got, the YouTube, because that's how most people are watching it. If you don't watch a full episode of Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite, you're probably watching those clips on social media. Yeah. And I wonder if that will ever happen. This wouldn't just be a wrestling thing either. This could be like a Monday Night Football thing or a World Series thing. But how many people watched it on TV? Great, cool. Also, how many people watched it online and all the various different outlets there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm waiting for the Nielsen's ratings to evolve, right? I know that this past year that they I think they started including like views for bars and things like that. So, you know, you can start to get a better idea of like, you know, if this bar has capacity for 4,000 people or whatever, you know, I know those numbers help too, but it's time, right? Like there needs to
Oh
be a
yeah.
better,
Like especially we're all getting our cable or whatever, you know, our television is all being provided to us digitally. I think it would just be a matter of clicking a consent box and going, yeah, you can let Nielsen or whatever rating system know exactly what I'm watching and when I'm watching it. And I
yeah.
think most of us would go, I kind of thought that was already happening.
Exactly. Yeah. I often wonder that. I'm like, don't they just know that I'm watching like, you know, Dynamite right now? I'm on
No,
tape.
no, you need a Nielsen rating box that actually sits in your house and somehow represents 10,000 people.
What's so creepy about the box I found out is like there's a really high pitched sound that we can't hear that is in the background of all the television shows, and that the Nielsen box can, and that's how it registers what's being played in the room. Is it hears this like subliminal signal being sent from what you're watching to the box? Isn't that creepy?
Well, it's also like we're talking about like sending telegrams here when the rest of us are texting and sending emails. How is that the technology that we're using?
Just saying. I found that out recently. I was like, that's really
That's insane.
yeah. I feel like I'm gonna get a brain tumor because of these Nielsen boxes.
and poor Fido in the corner, your poor dog in the corner going, ah.
Man, my dog literally, by the just a total tangent, I had to give her a bath like 10 minutes ago because I took her on a walk and she found the most vile smelling thing. I don't even know what this was. It was like under leaves. We don't even know what it was. She smelled terrible. Anyway, it was like she got skunked.
Was it something like did it used to be alive, this thing?
Whatever it was smelled like death. And I brought her back home and I was like, Liz, my girlfriend, I was like, I gotta watch this dog. The dog is getting a bath right now. I have no idea what our dog smelled and rolled around in, but it is awful. It is like a bag of spoiled shrimp. So yeah, it was gross.
I'm tasting that now. Jeez.
It was really bad. So, all right, last while we're talking AEW stuff, what about you, man? You got hired there. You were working. Obviously, I know you just did the Adam Cole interview. It's not like I'm guessing relationships are bad or anything like that. But what happened? Why didn't it work out with you?
Well, I was only asked to be part of the first show. So I was asked to be part of that first episode of Dynamite, October 2nd, live from Washington, D.C. And that was it. And, you know, as someone who is a giant wrestling fan my entire life and someone who's worked in broadcasting for my entire career, that was really, really cool to be a tiny little minuscule part of that historic show, which was the first time we saw wrestling on TNT in almost 20 years. So I went in, I had my very little spot with Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, and that's all I expected it to be. I was super surprised and also like really fortunate when they invited me back a few weeks later and I did something with the Rock and Roll Express in Charleston, West Virginia. But that was it. Yeah, I never signed a contract. It was just like, do you want to be part of the first episode? And I went, yes, I do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're like, you're cooler on celebrities. We'll let you do the Kevin Smith, Jason Mewes spot, which was a really cool spot, by the way.
Yeah, look, and it was so cool. Like here we are. Dynamite just had its 2-year anniversary recently. So cool to think that was 2 years ago. Also so cool to think of like how much has happened with AEW and wrestling in general. And just for all of us and like for you, Nick, for me, for everybody that's listening to this, like 2 years is a lot of time for like things to change. It's so cool to be able to look back at that moment and go, yeah, I was part of that for like 4 seconds.
Yeah, it is pretty wild. Just to kind of be like in this moment, I'm trying to appreciate it as much as I can, you know, because like I experienced the Attitude Era Monday Night War as a child. I will treasure those memories, but I'm experiencing this firsthand as a intelligent adult, and it's a very different thing. And it really is cool to just, you know, be in scrums, be around it. Just, you know, I got the first question with CM Punk on the media call after he debuted, and I'm like,
yeah.
Like what a bar trivia fact, right? I pissed him off. I asked about his contract, which was
Look, I'll just say that it's just a really cool time in general to be a wrestling fan, which, you know, also in turn means it's a great time to be a wrestler. But it's okay, everyone. It is okay to like more than one wrestling brand. It is okay. And I feel like we need to tell people it is okay to like WWE and AEW and Impact Wrestling and Ring of Honor and MLW and New Japan and. It's okay, everyone. It's okay.
Yeah, I 100%. Hey, real quick while I have you, I know we've gone a little. I didn't realize how long we've been talking. It's been a great talk.
It's just so good to catch up. Yeah.
I was looking into you because I always like to find fun facts and things about people. I had no idea. Are you like a pro bass fisherman, like legitimate like fisherman?
Yeah. So first of all, when I get passionate about something, Nick, like I dive all the way in. I don't check the depth of the water. I don't check the temperature of the water. I just dive all the way in.
Okay.
So bass fishing for me was like one of my very first loves. So pro wrestling, dove all the way in. Bass fishing, dove all the way in. Was fishing tournaments. I started fishing in tournaments when I was 14. I was fishing in pro-am tournaments with some of the biggest professional fishermen in the world, like biggest pro bass fishermen. Anyone that's listening to this, like, oh my gosh. Yeah, like Kevin Van Dam was in these tournaments, Mike Iaconelli, Brandon Polinick, like the biggest names. And I was on the amateur side doing this. Then I took that love of bass fishing, and one of my very best friends who I fished in a lot of tournaments with, named Aaron, we started a bass fishing company. So we have a company called Woo Tungsten, which is the noise you make when you catch a giant fish. Woo! So it's Woo, W-O-O exclamation mark. We sell tungsten fishing weights for bass fishing.
That is incredible. I love fishing. And fishing is so therapeutic, dude. It's like fishing and golf. You know, you can just go out there and like, obviously when it's competitive, I would imagine there's a little bit.
Yeah, it's like you didn't sleep the night before because you were worried that the fish you found yesterday in 17 feet of water, are they still going to be there? Are they going to move up into the shallows? Are they still eating crayfish? Are they eating shad now? Am I going to find them? Is someone else going to be on the spot? Yeah, the tournament bass fishing is like the furthest thing from therapeutic or relaxing, but I love it.
Fair enough.
I absolutely love it. Now that I live in California, there's some of the best bass fishing in the world here. California Deltic, Clear Lake, Castaic Lake. So yeah, it's exciting.
Do you have is there a wrestler that you bonded with over fishing that also loves fishing like you do, or no?
There's no one I've been like, hey, let's talk about like drop shotting for smallmouth bass or anything. But every time I see The Rock posting about his private pond, which I believe is in Virginia, I think that's his property in Virginia. Okay. When The Rock's posting these like videos of him catching largemouth bass, I'm like, Rock, like we would be best friends in another world. Yeah.
I just imagine you out in a boat, like fishing with The Rock, and like, all right, I'm gonna hit record. We're gonna do the interview here in the boat.
I feel so bad for every fish that he hooks because The Rock is, a very large, strong man. So every time he's setting the hook on those fish, I feel like he must be just ripping their faces off.
It's good that you have empathy for the fish, Chris. I'm good. I'm really glad that your head is like, oh, I feel bad for those fish. I'm very gentle. I'm a gentle fisherman. I'm so nice. I tuck.
Yeah. I don't set the hook nearly as hard as Dwayne Johnson.
Fair enough. I'm just saying, Chris Van Vliet fishes and talks wrestling with wrestlers. There's a whole series there that I would absolutely love to watch.
There is something, the crazy thing about that is like bass fishing is one of those interests, hobbies, sports, whatever you want to call it, that when you find out that somebody does that, you're like, oh my God, no way, we're best friends. In the same way that when you find someone at like work or someone like on your softball team that likes pro wrestling, like they're your instant best friend.
Yeah, that's why I asked if you had a wrestling friend that also fished, because it's one of those things I would imagine you bought. It's like when somebody tells me, oh, I like Andy Kaufman, I'm like, well, now we're gonna now we need to go to a bar, right?
Like when someone's like, I like Christopher Nolan films, I'm like, oh my gosh, do you have 17 hours so we can dissect everything that happened in Dunkirk?
Right, which is a great movie, by the way. I saw Dunkirk in theater. Wow, what a banger! That was a beautiful film.
So Dunkirk. Good. Although Tenet, what did you think about Tenet?
I haven't seen Tenet yet. That's the one.
My gosh!
Yeah, I heard the gimmick. Right, it's like backwards, like the story's told backwards or whatever. And I don't know, kind of put me off.
Yeah, a little bit. They have the ability to time travel, but I don't want to give too much away, but when you do time travel, you have to go in reverse back to that time. You have to go back in reverse in real time.
Have you interviewed Paul Walter Hauser yet?
No, I'd love to.
I feel like you and Paul would have like the best conversation.
Oh. And like, I love talking to pro wrestlers, and that's been a big reason that my YouTube channel did hit the 300,000 subscribers that you brought up earlier. And again, thank you for that. But I've spoken to people like of all walks of life, and actors, directors, comedians. The cool thing is you find these little things that we're talking about right now. You find the love of film or bass fishing or badminton or whatever. And you're just like, tell me more. Like, how did you get, like, why is this your thing?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is it's nice to have something to bond over, right?
So yours is Andy Kaufman?
Oh, I have this. This is right on the wall. There's my Andy Kaufman painting that my buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm very privileged to be friends with Bill Apter, who was like the guy who got Andy and Jerry together down in Memphis.
Right.
So I sit around and, I have Bill. I've literally just like interrogated Bill Apter over all of his Andy Kaufman stories, and yeah, every so often, whenever Bill needs Tony Clifton to show up at an event, I know a costume place where they keep his body in the basement. I get to go out and yell at people, and it's really, really fun. So, like,
I love it. And like this is what I love about it. Like, you realize that people aren't just two-dimensional, right? Like, that people have other like outside interests and outside, I don't know, just like crazy things that they are fascinated by. And this is the thing that I love the most about conversations and interviews, is being able to like peel that onion back, like layer by layer.
Yeah, that's why I saw the fishing thing, and I was like, "Oh, we're talking fishing." I'm going.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and if you're really into fishing, check us out on Instagram, Woo Tungsten. You'll be like, I recognize that guy.
Well, Chris, hey, this was great. I really enjoyed catching up with you and getting to talk about everything going on in pro wrestling. If people want to obviously listen to your interviews, find you, where do you want to send people right now?
Well, likewise, Nick. So good to be able to catch up with you. We need to do this more often. And I look forward to being able to see you in person again. Hopefully that's sometime soon.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, people can find me. It's just at Chris Van Vliet. That's on all social media. My podcast is Insight with Chris Van Vliet, talking to, yes, of course, a bunch of pro wrestlers on there, but just anybody who's at the top of their game in whatever profession that they're in. I mean, I had an astrophysicist on recently. We had a mind-blowing conversation. A former FBI negotiator on the show, Chris Voss. I mean, what a brilliant conversation that was, being able to just dive in his brains. So yeah, Insight with Chris Van Vliet. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. And if you aren't subscribed on YouTube, join me. You can be subscriber 300,001.
Wow. I think that's your favorite number.
It is now. It is.